The handbook. So we're into the last phase of the class. You've got to remember that the tutorials count. So they're exam questions. Okay, the one on the run cutter is not an exam question because it's too boring and too long. But it gives you the idea for design project, and that's what I was targeting. Now I've left certain bits out of the course that are in the handbook. I intend to do something on that next week, which is why it's a double lecture slot. Okay. I've only left a couple of things out, but one of them is this analytical integration of conversion down a bed, so with distance, which feeds into the bit on the plug flow reactor. Now, if I get the chance, I'll do that, and I'll cover it in the last lecture next week. Okay, so today, real catalysts. Catalyst shapes and usages, steam reforming process in outline, which is helpful to some of you, I'm sure, for design project. Assorted catalyst used in reforming and shift, catalyst formulation in brief. So the catalysts that are used are in fact there. You've handled them once already, but I'm going to pass them out again in a minute, and I will do so again this afternoon, so that you can actually see them. I was expecting another bit on the bottom of there. Key thing is they're very different. So the steam reforming catalyst at the front end of the process, then we've got the shift catalyst, and we've got a rock and some anti-sulfiding catalyst there. This one is something we'll deal with next week probably, which is, I always call the crown jewels of catalyst, because it's a zeolite. It looks like a lump and a boulder, and it looks like what it looks like. And we'll talk about that maybe this afternoon. It'll be a shock and awe tactic for this afternoon. So, key things about life and the development of catalysts in industrial processes. There's a key textbook, is this one. Don't expect you to go and get it. I did you the favour of photocopying an excerpt from it at the back of the handbook. So you can read it if you wish to know more about catalysts. Fourth year student came in my office yesterday and asked a load of questions. My dissertation students asked me a load of questions, and I said, did you bother reading the stuff at the back of your booklet? Of course they didn't. And in the back of that was stuff that was really helpful to the questions they asked me. So you will find when you're doing catalysts and you're doing that bit of reactor design, you should look at the back of this handbook. It's not just for today and to forget about. It's actually very useful. This is a classic text that everybody keeps. So you buy this book once and you keep it for the rest of your life. You don't need it for this course, so understand that. You don't need it. The bit I photocopied is in, but if you want to look it up, it's a classic text. Okay? Those of you with interviews at Johnson & Matthey will turn up to Johnson & Matthey, and the guy who's asking who's the big head of research will tell you there are 3 classic texts. That's one of them. And he has it on his bookshelf behind him. So what is it all about? It's all about looking at the key 3 real parameters. One, you could argue 2 of them are chemistry. You could argue that 2 of them are chemical engineering. So if you look at fluid flow, you're expecting that to be your domain, and you'd be quite right. Activity and specific surface area, okay. Knowing the Thiele modulus, or the effectiveness of the catalyst, and the appropriateness of the catalyst for your process, in other words, too fine a pound, a big pressure drop, no good to me, is an engineering crossover with chemistry. The final one at the bottom is resistance to sintering, poisoning, and fouling, is going to be how the catalyst is designed itself. And that's my domain, the chemist's domain. Okay, so, but we all work together on that, because if you don't tell me what the things are that are likely to foul your process or poison, I can do something about that, I can do something about that. Can't do much about that if you don't tell me what your process is about. In industry, of course, you'll know what the process is about. But that's a really nice diagram to remember later in your careers, in about 1.5 years' time. Last week we blew up a reactor and we killed a chemical engineer, remember? So that got your attention. This now is about the mundane side of it. Let's make our process better, let's investigate what we've got, and does it fit the basic criteria? So, key catalyst properties, I've highlighted it there. I think it's in the notes in the same format. High activity, high selectivity, long life, and recycle capability. We started with a graph for when you design a process. You design a process for its lifetime, not for its initial activity. Remember the curve that I put up that showed you that. For those of you who don't remember, it was simply in lecture 1 or 2. And we had, this is the conversion at the initial, but this is after T equals whatever. So
So that's the initial activity, so that's conversion. That might be length down the bed. That might be at the beginning to the end of the reactor. That might just be, well, actually, it would probably be the length of the reactor or the overall process conversion. So it would be down at the end of the reactor, so beginning and the end of the reactor. These conversions here are quite significant. That might be a factor of 2, it might be a factor of 4. If it's a factor of 4, your lifetime, you would argue, is probably shorter before you have to change it. If your catalyst has deactivated significantly, you would then want to recycle it. Many of your processes have 2 streams, one with a redundant catalyst, one with the catalyst that's which is active in the process. You then simply divert the streams and switch them over and reactivate the other one. Quite a lot of that happens. If you're in a refinery, they like to shut down their processes every 4 years because it costs so much, and then they'll shut them down for a year, a full year, and then they will do all the maintenance, all the retrofitting, all the stuff that they need to upgrade for environmental emissions and so on, and then they will put it back online. And lots of people have their fingers crossed when they do that, okay? So that's the sort of scary bit. Now some of you will have, well, not any of you in here, but some of the people returning may have been fortunate enough to have been in a refinery when it's got shut down. So, because you get to go in all the reactors, you get to see all the nuts and bolts, it's really quite interesting. Of course, they all panic because they've got no experiments taking place, so they go, well, I'm not doing anything because it's all shut. And they don't quite realise that just being able to go in to an FCC unit is an amazing opportunity that you would never get, or you get rarely in a lifetime. Now, perhaps that's exciting to me because I'm known as an FCC guy. Once bitten by catalysis in FCC, you're always an FCC guy. So I'm an FCC guy. Everybody who knows me in industry says, oh, Arthur, you're an FCC guy. What do you know about this? That's just the way it is. Now, to me, it's very exciting. To you, it's probably not that exciting. I appreciate it. Remember what I said, that people tend to go in, the ladies are always asked to clear out FCC units because they're small. They're generally small in frame, and they're small in hands and structure. So in ExxonMobil and Chevron Texaco, it's common practice for the ladies to go in with jackhammers and knock out the refractory tiles because they can get around the bends and all that thing. So ladies, be warned. You don't want to be an FCC person if you can avoid it. Okay. So, important process components, choice of catalytic metal. So you can see we're now taking this magic dust that you've got and saying, what are we going to put on it? Choice of metal, platinum, maybe nothing. Maybe just the structure itself. We're going to talk about that next couple of lectures. So we're going to actually introduce the materials that you support on. So you've now got we're trying to get an understanding of the magic dust that goes in the reactor that does the business for you. Because if you've got a little bit of understanding of that, it will help you with your process design. So, choice of support, mechanical strength, attrition, reactor design, into you, mass transport, heat transfer, catalyst design, me, spent catalyst recovery, me and you. Okay, so we've sort of got chemists and chemical engineers all over that. Now the biggest problem of all is that chemical engineers and chemists don't generally talk. And they don't talk because one's based in a lab with a specific remit and the other ones are on plant with the process. Thing is, you won't appreciate what the chemist doesn't understand. It's taken me years to figure out what my colleagues mean, but in the end, your nuts and bolts, process design, all of that works because you can design it with knowing that nothing about the thing in the box. You can say, I've got a box, I trust the guys will put the right stuff in the box, away we go. Now you're doing design project for yourself, you're going to have to decide what goes in that box. And that's what you kind of do as process engineers when you're monitoring the process for real. You want to know about how it's behaving, you want to know when to change it, and so on and so forth. So all those principles there are important. Now, I've nicked this table out of Esther Ventura Medina used to teach before NEMA. I nicked that out of her solid fluid systems, but then I found out where she nicked it from, and she got it from Principles in Richardson because I opened it up at the right page and found it. So it's actually there. But it just tells you the number of different shapes and the size. Remember we were talking, why is this important? It links to effectiveness and diffusion resistance. So it's back to last week's lecture, where we might take a pellet, and it might be that long, and the pore might go through the middle, like that. It takes a long time. The effective is a problem for us. So what do? We make it really small, and now we've had much less influence from diffusion. So where you're looking at the different sizes, And where you're looking at the different shapes, the key thing to remember, and I'll hand these out now, but I don't want them to move. So if they stay where they are for the moment. You've seen those because I've shown them to you. I'm going to take those two away now. Again, you've seen the difference between those two. I'm going to take that one away now. Don't take it personal. You're getting a very robust one. So that's the steam reforming catalyst he's having. Rattle the bottle, my friend, who's just got the steam reforming catalyst. Rattle the bottle. Okay. Very chunky. That's what you call a catalyst in the old trade. So, steam reforming is that one on the end here, the ring, the Rashid ring type thing. The extrude date, we've got that there. So that one, you can look at it and you can see how it's an extrude date and it should match that picture. And at the top, you've kind of got a cross between the cylinder and the tablet, which is the one you've got in red. Okay. Look at the size of them. These are real catalysts. That one is a catalyst, which is not actually a catalyst. It's designed to take sulfur out of the stream so it stops poisoning. That one's the steam reforming catalyst. It's nickel on alumina. And that one's a shift catalyst. That's what they actually look like. Okay? So you're seeing the real catalyst. On that, you've got a variety of length scales you can see. But you're pretty stuck with your design. You can't change much. We may be able to do that. Well, that's about it. For steam reforming, we're stuck. Yeah?
Sir, you know when you say usually the diffusion is towards the pore? Like, there are diffusion effects. For example, for the ring, where exactly is the active site?
For the ring?
Yeah, or for the sphere?
Well, for the one that you just gave away, which is rattling as it where it's that. Start with one and not the other. They are very different.
Okay, the one.
Okay?
Yeah,
So the one that's going up there, it's chunky. So we're going to learn some characteristics about it. It's chunky. It's hard. It's tough. It's made to last. It's got very little surface area. So the activity is probably around the outer surface. It's got a hole drilled through the middle of it so you don't have a problem with mass transport or even just pressure drop. Okay? So it's chunky because it's got to survive very high thermal gradients and high pressure. Or modest pressure. But it's got to withstand very severe temperature constraints. So it's got to be made to last. So where's the component? By nature, it's got to be on the outside because it will have low surface area, so it's no point, and the molecule won't get in. So you've got to start thinking about that. It's a good point he raises, and we haven't really. I've probably gone through it a bit. I think I've gone through it too quick, but since we've got that up there, since you asked, as always, you asked good questions. So if we've got this sort of setup, where we've got a hole through the middle of it and it's chunky, and then we've got a little tablet type thing like that, and then we've got a wiggly sort of extrudate like that, which is about fair enough, and then we've got a ball or a sphere. So this one, okay, that one is thick walled. Its physical characteristics are it's very thick, it's very chunky. The tablet is designed in the way that it's designed, but it's like a tablet. The one that's like a worm, which is passing around, which you and I pass around if you would, has particular characteristics, and the sphere, which I've kind of drawn a bit big there, I have to say, apologies for that. Has another set of characteristics. If it's a ball, you're assuming that the surface has a lot of internal area, so you're assuming that things are going to go into it and come out of it, and it's going to be fairly porous. If you've got an extrudate that looks fairly, and the density of the two things are very important, so you'll find that the worms are very light, whereas the steam reforming catalyst is very heavy. So if it's tending to be in that kind of shape, it means that it's absorbing something, but it's light. If it's light, it's got high surface area. If it's got a high surface area, you're expecting it to absorb over its whole surface, internal and external. The ball will have something on it, or in it, or around it that's active. We'll cover that next week, because that's very specific. This one, because it's got low surface area, it's going to want to react on the surface. You don't really want it to be doing a lot of absorption and then diffusion. You want it just to be reacting. So that's likely to be surface. low surface area, and it's typically 15 metres square per gram. This one is the large surface area, and it might be 100 to 1,000 metres square per gram. This one is likely to be 500 to 1,000 metres square per gram. This one here, is a problem, because it's a tablet. And depending how you make it, you can actually start to anneal the surface, you could blind the surface, so you could end up with this thing having low surface area. But that's the shift catalyst tended to be a tablet, but it's meant to be dispersed evenly throughout the surface. So it's meant to have a surface area, but it's got a surface area which is more akin to 50 meters squared per gram. So the shape, to me, equals a surface area. To you, that doesn't equal a surface area, because you've not got that experience. But why I'm passing the things around, and why I'm saying that, is to allow you to consider that I'm not going to take that surface off, because it makes it look like something else. So what's the rule of thumb? The rule of thumb is, I wasn't going to use this today, but I will. This is here. Into a good class, and you're obviously wanting to learn. I know that should be all. Just don't take that away. So, particular catalysts, which are high surface area, and are in my. This is a geothermal tuff. Okay, so a geothermal tuff. So this is something that's been created over millions of years. It doesn't look very much when you're walking around on the hills. You fall over it, you'll kick it because it's in the way. However, it's got a beautiful zeolite on the inside, which is the things that are natural. Now, please, 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 don't touch the inside of it. Not because it's dangerous, but because it comes out and it'll ruin it. Okay? So touch the outside and look at it with your eyes. If you will be so kind. Okay? So now, you cannot judge a book by its cover. For consequently, you saw a rock. It looked very innocuous, but actually, it's got a beautiful crystalline zeolite that's formed over millions of years on the inside. Just like diamonds, except these are a bit cheaper. Are the same sort of thing that you've formed over a few millennium to then make into nice wedding rings. To shackle the males of the population, sorry, to get married and live happily ever after, as I do frequently. Right. So, what I'm trying to say is there's a general rule here. If it's chunky and it's robust and it's built to last, it's likely to have low surface area. Therefore, it's likely to be externally activated. If it looks like a ball and it looks porous, it is what it says on the packet. It's porous and everything's supposed to be distributed internally. So that's the general rule. Chunky, low surface area. Where's the active ingredient, which was the question? The active ingredient is built into it, but you're not going to get very far into it because it's got a very low surface area. We are talking about the difference between having the surface area of my booklet versus the surface area that is displayed by the floor at the front. That gives you a rough analogy of the things that we're talking about the difference. Chunky, you've got very little surface area. Your active ingredient's got to be on the outside predominantly. That's your surface against the floor space that I'm stood on. Okay? Which is quite 15 metres by 3 metres across. Those are a listing in black and white. Okay. So it's a good question. It was worth the diversion. So, I'm not asking you to memorize everything that's in the table. You'll be relieved to know. However, this is useful for you when you are designing those reactors next semester. What's the catalyst look like? What form am I putting it in the reactor? How long is it going to last? Your coursework was designed to introduce you to concepts like deactivation and things that go wrong. That's the idea for designing for end of life, not beginning of life. Enough said. So, for everybody who can't have the bottles in front of them at the same time, that's what you've got in your hands, with the exception of this one. And there's a reason for that. Started over here, and there's a problem with. I want you just to compare the weight of the two. So the density of the two. So the gentleman at the front here has got one of the shift catalyst at the top, and he's going to pass both of them around, and he's got what looks like rocks. The one that's numbered number 1 is a methanol synthesis catalyst. It is simply iron ore. It is a rock dug out of the ground and put into the reactor. It is simply that. Why? It's chunky, it's very dense, as you will say. It's twice or 3 times heavier than the other thing. So you're going, well, we're not really doing this because we're scientific, we're doing it because it's cheap. So that's the other constraint. You've got your beauty. Sure, we could use a different catalyst for methanol synthesis, but we use a boulder, which is not on wood, instead of something that's beautiful down here, because dirt cheap, and we can make a fortune on it. ICI did very well out of it for a very long time. I think INEOS now runs that setup. So I want you to just look at it because the length scales are important. And I know you're probably going, oh, he's really going on about this. What's that important about a few pictures? I can see that written all over your face. Key things, different sizes, different shapes, but look at the dimensions. Remember what I said about little d over big D being how many pellets in. So now, I've given you the hints on how you might design a reactor. I can even give you a spreadsheet to tell you how you get the conversion down the bed. I've introduced you to the concept of effectiveness and how a catalyst might be about 90% effective if we're really lucky. And I've talked to you about mass transport and diffusion that are actually limited by maybe the length scale of the pores, and you might make them shorter. So I've put the whole thing. That is the result of all that. Those catalysts are the result of all those designs. Now, this one, which I haven't given you, is very interesting. You asked me where the active agent was. Where do you think on this one the active agent is? Here. Say again. It's in the black bit. Anybody else think it might be somewhere else? Correct. You shouldn't. I always assume it's on the outside unless there's obviously a trick question. That could have been. You could have been too clever. You're good and gone with a trick question. So this little baby here is a platinum on alumina catalyst. It is designed with an alumina center. The alumina center is not very porous, so they put the expensive metal on the outside. People like me design catalysts with platinum through the whole thing. We have a bit of a problem. The engineers want a catalyst with the platinum on the outside, and they're comparing the results with the platinum on the outside, but people like me, it's easy for us to compare platinum throughout the whole thing, but we're not comparing like with like. We've got apples and oranges, and we'll get different results. I just wanted you to see what an eggshell catalyst looked like. Remember I talked about an eggshell catalyst? That's a real eggshell catalyst. It actually is black all over, of course, but I've just cut a few in half just for you. You will then say, well, how much have you cut in half and ruined, Arthur? And I will say there's about 50 quid's worth there. And it's on a meter ruler. Centimetre, you can see the centimetres. We're only 4 centimetres by about 3 centimetres, is about 50 quid's worth. So it gives you an idea why you don't want to mess around with the amount of active ingredient that you put on something. Okay? So, how about something about engineering? Catalysts will deactivate. Nice simple slide. If an exam came up on how does a catalyst deactivate, you might want to do a bit of reading around and not just repeat everything that's written on there. It might not be an exam question, but if it is an exam question, because it's quite an important one, how do catalysts change over a period of time? And why do we end up with this conversion going like that? Most of you will probably think, well, what are we doing to the catalyst? We're probably operating at high temperatures. We're probably operating at process conditions which are producing molecules that we don't like. Or our feedstocks are impure. The first one to look at is the feedstock, poisoning. There's lots of very fancy catalysts, and I'm going to give you some of the little bit of chemistry next week, which isn't too much for you, but we'll tell you all the elements involved in the various formulations of catalysts. But let's say we've got an alumina catalyst, that's alumina. A-L-U-M-I-N-A. It's Al2O3. So it's 2 aluminiums and 3 oxygens, and it forms a structure which has short range order. We'll discuss that this afternoon. It doesn't like certain chemicals, but one of the chemicals that it doesn't like is carbon created from organic chemistry reactions. So carbon can act as a poison. The platinum catalyst that was black that we saw, which was an external catalyst, the eggshell catalyst, the black ring around the white internal centre on the picture before, that's a platinum on alumina catalyst. That platinum does not like sulphur, and it will kill it. So refiners spend a lot of time trying to take sulphur out at the start of the process. So you will want to know what are your contaminants going into your reactor. Now, somewhere around the room, the little worm has worked its way around and it's stopped somewhere, perhaps, because I don't know that it arrived over here. So where's the little wormy one? Hey, hello, young man. So that is designed to take out sulphur. It's there to absorb H2S, mercaptans, and so on and so forth. Does gas smell that you get in your cooker? Does gas smell? You will hope it does. Why does it smell? It's got mercaptans in it. We put sulfur-containing compounds in it to make it smell, because our noses are designed to pick up things like H2S, rotten eggs, whatever. H2S is a very low concentration that you can detect it. We put mercaptans into gas because gas doesn't smell. So we put it there so that you and me and Auntie Mabel doesn't kill herself when she turns on the gas and forgets to light it. Modern day flats are now not supposed to be designed with gas cookers in them. They're supposed to have got rid of that. Okay? Gas central heating is not even supposed to be put in there, I think, now, because there's too many accidents with it. But it's there to be smelled. Well, you can't smell it on a refinery, but it comes in the crude oil, it comes in in the gas as well. So you call it sour gas in the trade because it's got H2S in it. Catalysts don't like it, you've got to get rid of it. So you will have that in your processes, especially those of you who are doing bioprocesses. So any of you doing bioprocesses now, what are you up to over there? They're enjoying themselves. So sour, come on, pay attention. Sour gas and H2S is a bad thing. So you poison your catalyst. Now then, if you're doing a catalytic process which has got big molecules in it, and some of you might be doing that with biomolecules, trying to do something, but you'll also have things called side reactions, oligomerization reactions, addition reactions, where you're adding carbon-carbon bonds together and making big molecules. So big molecules, and you're working at 300 degrees C, the first thing you would do as design engineers is you would look at what the boiling point is of these materials. Because if you're creating big materials and you're working at 300 degrees C in a reactor with flowing gas, but you've got pores, you're going to condense. So you will look at the amount of condensation. You may even, for example, look at G points and so on and so forth, because it's technical and in your domain. In my domain, I just look to see if anything's going to condense at the reaction temperature and it's too big to get out. Most of the common fouling is due to, and most of the stuff that doesn't work on my liquid phase catalysis reactions with biosystems is the thing that's in it absorbs and doesn't come off, and the product is more absorbent but could also be more bulkier, and then you can't get rid of it. So you fouled your catalyst and you have to throw it away. Got a classic example of a brilliant piece of work we've been working on for 3 years upstairs. Lovely lad, very, very clever. And he's doing a biosystem, and he can blind his catalyst within an hour and 40 minutes. So it's completely wasted time. Never be an industrial process. Just don't tell him, right? Never be an industrial process. Go on.
What's the difference between poisoning and fouling?
You play football? Okay. So I'm going to give you arsenic. That's poisoning you. I'm going to kick you. That's fouling you. Two different processes. So poisoning is where you're actually putting a chemical on and it's stuck. So sulfur is taking the metal out. Fouling where I've just got a bulky molecule and he's in the way. And I can't get anything else through. So it's just a physical condensation of something that's trapped. So you're trapping something. In the sulfur, it's actually binding to the metal or it's bonding to it, and it's permanently stuck. You can do things to try and remediate it, but you're struggling, especially with platinum and sulfur, because platinum adores sulfur. Okay? Next thing is obvious, mechanical collapse. Where will we get mechanical collapse? Will we, for example, in that steam reforming catalyst that's going around the room, that's nickel, that's the one, thank you, young man. Thank you for playing. So the chunky one. Will we get mechanical collapse in that? Well, possibly. But it's designed for not doing so. Because it's built like a brick, you know what. Okay? A brick outhouse is the polite words, I think. So, mechanical collapse. What about that thing that's the wormy thing that's going around? Do you think that will collapse easily? The answer is, of course it will. Look at it. It fall apart, seeing as look at it. So you won't want to be putting that into a very high temperature process. You'll want it in a more modest process. So mechanical collapse can cause because of temperature, thermal shock, but it can also happen because you get capillary action and liquids in it that can blow up. So suppose it absorbs something, and that absorption, it's stuck, and it condenses it, and you want to heat it up, and you want to heat it up to get it out, to break that molecule and get rid of it so you regenerate your catalyst. If you heat it up, and it's an exothermic reaction, or even if you've got a metal there and it's an exothermic, you could suddenly have a local hotspot and boom. So remember what we were talking about last week, where we had a very exothermic reaction that suddenly lifted off and couldn't be contained. The same thing can happen inside the powders that we have, which have got the pores in them. So inside here, we can have something stuck here. One of the most common errors is that catalysts, which are at room temperature, stuck in with a man with a JCB or a lady with a JCB into your reactor. They then turn them on and they heat them up. And they heat them up above the boiling point of water very quickly. So you now steam the catalyst. So you've now got very active water molecules inside the catalyst just bashing the structure apart. The analogy is you put your hand over the kettle at 25 degrees C. Nothing. You boil it, you won't hold your finger there very long. You might hold it away in the steam because it's nice and cool, but right in the center it's hot and it's going to be doing a lot of damage. So that's very common. Thermal shock. Just heating something up and heating it fast will cause it to break. And finally, thermal cycling. So for example, we talked about we're going from initial conversion to low conversion after a period of time. Well, to get back up there, we've got to heat something, we've got to do something, we've got to regenerate the catalyst. The number of times we do that has a detrimental effect. You're probably sitting there going, well, okay, I can heat something up in a controlled way, and I can do all these things in a controlled way, but you'd be wrong. Because we talked about a reactor that was no wider than my finger or the best bit of my thumb, and I was telling you I got a temperature drop across that of 100 degrees C. Okay? 100 degrees still very little. Well, thank you for calling. Is that time up, is it? So, if I can't control it on a thumb's worth, how are you going to do it in a meter cubed? Even if you separate the beds and make multiple tubes and make it nice, you can't do it. So you're always going to have elements of these things. And I know groups that are working with Dave Creswell and Tom Rogers, well, Tom couldn't do anything, Carlos, they will talk about how these things happen. Certainly Dave Creswell's groups will know a lot about poisoning because you'll be starting to look at what your feed streams look like. And if you've got a bio feed stream, it's awful. If you've got a petrochemical feed stream, it's awful. But they're different kinds of awful. Okay? One with an oxygen, sulfur, and all sorts of metals that are horrible in it, which is a biosystem. Another one which is hydrocarbons with lots of heavies and sulfurs and nitrogens in them. So different kind of poisons. So, you've got the take-home message. You've got the graph that was at the beginning of the lecture course that you will stick in your mind that when you design your process, how long is it going to run for, what's the capex, what's the opex. Opex is going to be based around how long it runs. What metals and things I put in it depends on what might poison it. And that's a good study of how catalysts might die. Yes, sir?
When you deactivate, when you recycle a catalyst, you cannot undo the poisoning, right?
The poison is tough to undo, correct. If it's sulfur, you have it. If it's nitrogen, it's not so good either, but it's not totally. You put things in which are sacrificial.
And what about fouling?
Fouling, you can recover from fouling because you can heat it up, you can oxidize, you can put air through maybe, you can potentially wash it with something so you can solvent extract.
But not completely. That's why the catalyst deactivates over time, right?
Every time you do something, the catalyst will initially go back to its original point. But each time, it's a good, yet again, a good question. What will happen is you'll go back to that point, but eventually you'll start going back to that point, then you go back to that point, then you go back to that point. And the reason is because of all the washing, the thermal cycling, you're introducing human error, you're introducing violence, because you're going to pick it up, put it out, put it somewhere else, you're going to heat it, you're going to oxidize it, so there's all kinds of violence done to the poor thing. And this thing is something like £10,000 a ton or £20,000 a ton, you know, and you go, look, if it was your car, you'd wash it and polish it and you'd be very gingery, but you're not with a cat. So let's just heat it up. Process engineer comes in at 9 o'clock at night, you've gone home, oh, the hell with this preconditioning process, push button, heat. You don't know about it unless you've got recording devices. Of course, every industry in the world has recording devices. Wrong. You know, so I went on placement last year, I won't say what the name of the company was, I looked at 3 polymerization batch reactors, not one of them had a sensor inside it. just stirred it, heated it, and it went up by itself. How do you know when it's gone over temperature? I asked innocently. Oh, that's when the off gas to the environment goes out. So our scrubber goes offline because we've just drowned it basically with too much contaminant. So too much waste gas of the wrong type has now been absorbed on our bed, and we see a peak on the monitor on the end of our scrubbing device. So the monitor is not here where the reactor is. Okay? It's a physical demonstration of the difficulty of working in engineering. It's not here. And I'm not kidding. I'm not leaving. It's out here. That's roughly where it is. So you're not going to see if you've got a problem in your reactor. You've got the monitor out the friggin' door 2 floors away. Right? And that's the bottom line. So when you're on a plant, and that's a modern plant, that's a plant that is a major leader in polymer products. Perhaps Perspex might be one of them. Maybe they make bathrooms for the home that they sell on. Maybe they don't. That gives you an idea. And I'm talking about a batch reactor, and I don't want to use you as the example, but it ain't much bigger than this bit here. It's about a 2 meter cube reactor. And the sensor is, oh, when we blow the thing up for the environment and the little neighbour starts complaining about the smell. All right?
Thank you very much.
No problem. Graphic and a good question. And I get fit at the process. I'm exhausted. I went up a bit. Right, okay, last slide then, so we don't overload the brain before we get to this afternoon session. So, those are the mechanisms. You asked about them. Now, these are nice little graphics, and they mean something, okay? So, I know they're in black and white, and it's not so obvious. So, if you talk about coke formation, you'll all go, well, what's coke? I don't know. So, coke formation, that cleans the sinuses out. So, coke formation is formed because you've got residue. When you crack a product, you're not supposed to laugh that much. So, you're a good class. I'm not looking at anybody in particular. Where is he in blue shirt? There you go. Ooh, party fair. Sorry, you go a bit flippant at the end of this course. Right, so you've got carbon. You've got a carbon-carbon reaction. Let's say you've got an olefin or your molecule and you crack it and you get little molecules, and the little molecules react and they react with other molecules. They make bigger molecules. The whole thing eventually carries on and it makes carbon, which is deposited in the pores and blocks. There's a really nice, easy way of designing that. I'll tell you that after in the next lecture. So you can draw it and you put a little schematic, an extra mark in the exam paper if the question comes up. You talked about the active site, and you are very fixated, or some of you are on that, and you should be, because you don't really know what it looks like. And I'm talking about active site theory. An active site is a point. It's something. It's a metal. It might be this spill on here. That's an active site, let's say. The rest of it's inactive. But the molecule's got to get to it. It's got to do something. It's got to come off. So the aim of the exercise there is look at the shiny diamond-like structures. They're not diamonds. It's meant to be a platinum metal cluster. And that's what it's trying to represent, a platinum metal cluster. And there's about 30 atoms in that metal platinum cluster. And they happen to form themselves like a truncated octahedron. You'll see one of them this afternoon. Not platinum, but a truncated octahedron. I ain't got that much money, sorry. So what happens is the reaction takes place. You've got coking which forms, but what is trying to be shown here as well is that the sulfur now bonds onto the metal. If it bonds onto the metal, the reactants can't get in. So basically the sulfur poisons it because it absorbs and then stops anything else getting at the active site. Finally, you've got, let's look at sintering. So sintering is maybe putting holes in things. If you heat ceramics and do things to them, you make holes in them. You can sinter materials by heat treatment and doing various things to them. But sintering in terms of a catalyst with an active metal also has another meaning. It means that the metals agglomerate and they come together. So what is meant by the diagram is that the little individual crystal moves and the next little bit of crystal moves and they move together and they make one big lump in the middle. What have you done? You've lost a hell of a lot of surface area. You've now lost surface area, so sintering is about the loss of metal surface area or active site surface area. It's a very common problem. It's a major deal. I'm hoping I've got some nice pictures of that this afternoon for you, so it's not too taxing. And finally, what we've got is sintering and solid phase transitions an encapsulation of metal sites. So what does that actually mean? It means this is our beautiful structure, here's all our active sites, and we did something really wrong. We heated it up a lot, we did some steaming on it, we've had it collapse. It's basically mechanically collapsed and stopped all access to the pores. So you're saying to yourselves, well, surely we don't design processes to do this. Surely we try to stop it. Fluid catalytic cracking. I'm an FCC man. It should at least begin the lecture and it should at least end the lecture if I'm doing my job right. FCC, fluidized bed, cap cracking, making carbon, deactivates the catalyst within 15 milliseconds, 15 to 100 milliseconds. Catalyst goes into a 5-meter riser tube about this diameter, 5 meters tall, so about half a meter, maybe 3/4 of a meter in diameter. Feed goes in, catalyst goes in, it gets to the top and it's dead. Okay, but so, we designed that process and it works, and we've been using it for the best part of 50 years. And then what do we do to get our lovely precious catalyst at £10,000 to £20,000 a tonne back, which has got a lovely surface area and it's very reactive and we love it dearly? What do we do to it? We stick it in a regenerator. The regenerator works between 750 to 800 degrees C. That's 250 degrees above the process temperature that we put it in at, and we put it in steam. So we put it in a very energetic kettle and we regenerate it, and then we put it back into a fluidized bed. So what have we got there? We've got coking, we've got sintering, we've got physical attrition because it grinds itself into dust, and then we throw away 25% of it to 40% of it every year. Every year it just goes into waste. We steam it, so we then break it, we then collapse the structure, and we carry on with that process year in, year out, and it's the mainstay of a refinery to make gasoline. But we carry on doing it, we've been doing it at least 50 years, and we'll carry on doing it for as long as oil goes, and we're still driving cars that run on fuel and gasoline. Okay? So all those things are real things, and they happen all the time, and people do play around with formulations to try and stop them. If you remember some of those anecdotes, some of that material, and this as well, that will do you very well if that was to be an exam question. It's now time to stop, so I thank you very much. Tom's waiting at the back, but I'm sure he'll give you a break. And then I'll see you, remember, in here at 2